until mid-1930s.
Now, which other dolls would you have played with as a child?
This one, I got her for Christmas one year. She's a Madame Alexander, and Madame Alexander was an interesting doll maker. She was a Russian emigre, and she started with cloth dolls in the 30s, and then when plastics took over, she made her dolls in hard plastic and then soft plastic, and they still make them today.
You've got some really miniature dolls there in a very precious golden casket. Tell me about those.
Well, these are my most treasured possession. These were given to me by my grandmother when I was 5, and I was visiting her in Oregon, and she was bedridden, and she told me to go over to the bureau and open the drawer, and at the back was a matchbox full of these delightful little dolls. She'd bought them for a penny when she was a young girl at the turn of the century, and she dressed them for her youngest sister.
This is a marvellous box set we've got here, complete with birth certificate and little hot water bottle and everything. What's her name?
Her name is Amos Sandra, and she's my most beloved doll of my entire collection of dolls. And I received her in 1949, and she's the baby of Amos and his wife Ruby. And it was at a time when we sat around and listened to the radio, and it was a very famous East Coast radio show, Amos and Andy. They were taxi drivers in New York City. And one day the doorbell rang, and it was the post office van, and he had a package for me. And it was at a time when children didn't receive presents except at Christmas and birthdays, and it wasn't either. And I opened it up, and there was Amos Sandra. And this is the original Amos Sandra. She suffered dreadfully during the many years, but she knows all my secrets. And then when I went to a toy fair in England, I found an original, absolutely, even with her $2.98 price tag.
The wooden one you're holding there, who made that?
Schoenhut. And Schoenhut is my favorite toy and doll maker. And he's most famous for the circus, which I collect here, try and find the pieces. It was an interesting concept because he started with a very small 3 clowns and ladder and chair, and then every Christmas new pieces were made.
You've got some of the famous Kewpie dolls. I love the original box here. Tell us how popular these were.
Very popular. Designed by the illustrator Rose O'Neill, and they came in every shape, size, and form on china, and they were tokens given to World War I soldiers to take with them. And
I've spotted some Native American Indian dolls here. Were these made on reservations?
that actually wasn't made by Mary McAboy to be sold on reservations, but actually not made by the Indians. The one next to it was made by the Seminole Indian tribe in Florida in the late 40s.
They're all wonderful dolls. It really is lovely to see them all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you've got a great collection you'd like to share with us, do write to me with some photos if possible. The address, as always, is Collector's Lot, P.O. Box 17, Plympton, Devon, PL7 5YG. Now, all week we've seen wonderful and sometimes wild collections, and for our final trip to the States, what could be more appropriate than to visit a woman who has so many collections she just can't count them all? Laura Beaumont went off to have a look and to gather some top tips on how to display collections of every shape and size.
There are many different ways of storing your collectibles. You can put them in the garage, you can put them under the bed, you can put them in the attic. But if you really want people to see what you've got, you have to make a display. And that can sometimes be a bit tricky. So we've brought together 2 creative forces, a collector of collections and a display expert.
I see something that looks sort of interesting or neat. It just speaks to me, and then, you know, before you know it, I found another one and then another one. I started, for example, somebody handed me this and said, "What is it?" And I didn't know what it was. I fiddled around with it, and it turns out that it's a folding hanger.
How ingenious.
And it's just fantastic. I thought, well, that's pretty cool, you know, good thing. And I didn't think much more about it, and then I saw I started seeing more of them, and so we have all kinds of folding hangers. And how come you needed to design so many different kinds of the same mundane thing, you know? It's incredible.
So once you're focused on something, you then can see lots and lots of similar things.
You start seeing
Yeah.
them. And I once went to an antique show, and there was a man named Mr. Zink who was selling watering cans, and he had a whole bunch of watering cans. They just looked so great together. And so minutes later, we were clanking away with a dozen watering cans tied up in purple ribbon to hold them together. And people stopped us and said, "Lady, why do you need 12 watering cans?" It's like, that's not the point, dear. So it's very funny.
And the amazing
But-
thing is, they look great. A whole
Yeah,
mass.
well, any family of objects starts doing something different than just one lonely little one. And part of the fun is figuring out what I can put in what and how I organize the categories of things. So it's the sorting and the cataloging and the editing as well as the amassing of it. And I think that you have a responsibility when you're accumulating in this kind of volume to keep things as organized as possible.
Kathy John Grande is a conservation scientist. She's recently co-authored a book on the best way for collectors to display their collections. So Kathy, have you ever seen anything like this before?
Not in one person's house. No, I haven't, I have to admit. It's just fantastic. She has things in boxes, in cases, on top of tables. She's used almost every conceivable space there is, except one perhaps, and that's the ceiling. She hasn't used the ceiling, and that would be a good place to hang things from, especially, for instance, maybe the watering cans.
Now that's another very good point. You've got to be careful how you store things, haven't you? Which is something you know all about, the do's and don'ts of
Yes.
displaying and storage.
There's certain things like textiles in particular. They don't like light, for instance, and so you must maybe put them out for a while, but then roll them up, rotate them, put them back into your drawers or under your bed in boxes, wrapped in acid-free tissue, in acid-free boxes.
Wood is very bad for storing things.
Is it really?
Yeah, it off-gases and it reacts with plastic. I mean, this is a typecase drawer table that I made, and I shouldn't have some of these things in here, but
No.
most of them are metal, and you know,
They'll be-
there's a limit to how compulsive you
Yeah,
want to get.
Because you use your collection to store your collection in, don't you?
Yes, the storage is part of the collection.
Which is great. Fabulous.
I have typecase drawers, and I have 3 dental cabinets, which of course are excellent things, and then my prize is a Wooten desk, which is a desk from the 1870s, and I got that for my rubber stamps. It's probably the most luxurious and extravagant rubber stamp storage facility going. Outrageous.
What a true collector. Now it's time for the answer to this week's Golden Year competition. Just to recap, the main clues were: in which year did Prince Rainier of Monaco marry Grace Kelly? The racehorse ESB win the Grand National? The epic film War and Peace open in London? And the Suez Canal crisis take place? It was 1956. Congratulations to those of you who got it right. One of you will be the lucky winner of this Tiffany-style lamp. And for those of you who didn't get it right, don't worry, there'll be another chance next week. Sadly, we've come to the end of this special 3 weeks of All Things American. I just want to thank Pete and Val Clark for their wonderful hospitality. I hope you've enjoyed our trip around the States, and as they say in America, have a nice day. And until I see you again, so long. We sent Jethro Miles off to a themed collectors fair to discover the delights of